special warm welcome and greetings to you guys in the name of the Lord. Today we're going to talk about, it's basically part 2, but this is where the Cabal strikes back. And Rossen, as always, you've prepared something and it's always gripping. So guys, please don't go anywhere. Right at the end, we're going to give you guys some good news, and remember to like, subscribe, comment and share. Get involved, visit our website. Handing over to you, brother.
Thank you. Dan, bless you, brothers and sisters. Once again, it's a pleasure to be with you. We're going to talk about the pandemic. You know, that's okay. Everyone wants to know about the pandemic.
So let's just say that it's a planned-demic, is what I call it.
Exactly.
And let's just look quickly. Sorry that I'm doing this, but it's amazing how it started in Wuhan, China. It spread throughout the whole world, yet it was contained in China.
Indeed.
Doesn't that make you guys wonder?
Indeed. And we're going to continue now with the details, how it came about, how it happened, and most importantly, why it happened. What is the plan from here onwards? And by the way, have you noticed that we wear warm clothes and we're in the middle of the winter? You may think we're in Africa, in South Africa, and here it's sunshine the whole year. But we have like 3 months cold, not snow really, but I think July here is I think the coldest. We've got 3 weeks before we go back to summer.
And apparently some folks from London say, you speak funny, or they think we came like to visit them in slave ships. We in South Africa actually have pretty sophisticated stuff. I just thought I would throw that in, but let me not take too much of you guys' time, but welcome again.
Amen. And let's continue now in part 1 of this update, US at War. We spoke about the epic spiritual warfare going on in the United States as we speak against the Cabal. We covered what happened shortly before Trump took office and the 2 years 2017 and 2018. What happened? Today we're going to move forward 2019 until the pandemic happened, and we'll go to our current developments taking place. Again, before we start, I'd like to mention a few other concepts that I believe they're helpful for you to understand. They are to do with the setup of the Banking Cartel. I mentioned in the previous session that the 3 major centers were London, the Vatican, and New York. That's the banking capital, London, the financial center, Wall Street, the military center, the Pentagon, and the religious center, the Vatican. And the overseeing authority and power is the Vatican. That was until Trump stepped in 2018. The Cabal, however, or the Banking Cartel, they have other hubs, international hubs as well for their operations. These include Saudi Arabia, Israel, France, Germany, and China. In the last video, I mentioned that President Trump managed to destroy the Cabal's operations in Saudi Arabia. In Israel, at the moment, there is a power struggle. And the 3 elections I mentioned that you've seen in Israel taking place are a sign that things are changing there. And Israel was strongly controlled by the Cabal for a long time, and I believe currently many of those Cabal officials are being removed. I am pro-Israel of God, but not pro-Israel of the Cabal, just like I mentioned last time. And it is a fact that Israeli spy agents, the Mossad, and many of their operators have meddled in US internal affairs. And I think there is a direct link with Israel to do with 9/11, what happened there. So I think Trump is doing some things in Israel. I believe the last wait, let me just pick up from where I stopped. I mentioned in the last video that the Vatican and the United Kingdom have been also neutralized. The House of Windsor, the Pope, and Trump's visit. Trump managed to dismantle the cabal's major centers of power and capture their most precious jewel. I mentioned that is the Federal Reserve. Thus achieving more than any other leader in the past 700 years that tried to oppose the cabal. That is remarkable. The hope of recovery and pushback from the cabal could only come from one of their other remaining hubs of operations. What are they left with? Germany, France, and China. Because Germany and France are toothless players against the US simply because they rely on the United States for their own protection through the NATO alliance. China was their last remaining option. For those who think that the communist China is an independent nation, not controlled by the banking cartel, you are mistaken. I explained in the last video that China could never get the economic support they have unless they were backed up by the banking cartel. The Federal Reserve's takeover was the straw that broke the camel's back. Without the Feds, their main supply of money, the printing press, so to speak, the source of their financial supply was removed. When Julie Shelton was nominated in early January 2020 to sit on Federal Reserve's board, this was clear indication that Trump has established a firm grip on the Federal Reserve. Shelton is meant to restructure and manage the Feds in the interim. She is a firm believer in the gold standard, which is the very opposite of the banking cartel's Fed operations and the fiat currency that you are used to. Money out of thin air, paper money, no gold protection whatsoever. You can see on the screen her mentioning of a nomination. At this point you may ask, how do you know that the Federal Reserve is under the control of POTUS, of the President of the United States? Well, let's look at Executive Order 13818 on the screen, dealing with the blocking the properties of persons involved in serious human rights abuse and corruption. We looked at that executive order in the last video. I'm repeating that because I want you to pay attention to what it says. If you read the highlighted sections, this order allows the president to repossess and take control of any organization or entity operating within the boundaries of the United States where the shareholders are involved in serious human rights and other criminal abuses that threaten the international financial and economic system. Look, listen to what a beautiful description of the cabal establishment. It's exactly what they've been causing for the last 700 years, not only the last 70 years. Don't you think that President Trump had all the proof he needs that the Federal Reserve's shareholders are guilty of treason? And especially the JFK files, which directly implicate the banking cartel in the murder of the United States former president. Okay, this is how the President of the United States assumed full control of the Federal Reserve. Once the indictments of the Fed shareholders were issued, they claim to possession of power and authority over the Feds was removed. My second argument about this is very simple. if the Federal Reserve was still under the control of the cabal, the President of the United States could be driven out simply by the Feds refusing to release more funds for the Treasury, thus crippling Trump's administration completely. If they stop the flow of money, everything stops actually, and there is no solution further except to seek a new leadership. And I have a third argument. The USA was already in default of its international financial obligations in 2018 simply because the current debt that they had at the time of could not be even serviced, let alone repaid. Therefore, when the president engaged in a trade war with China, he could only afford to do so if he was able to print money to cover the deficit. That means that when he started the trade war with China, Trump already had a control of the Federal Reserve. So Trump was able to do that because he was in control of the printing press, so to speak. And all this scam fiat money that the cabal used for the last 70 years, or since 1913, then when they established the Federal Reserve, now Trump was paying back the debt of the United States. All these government bonds that were purchased from nations and banks around the world, and they were due to them. Now Trump was issuing scam money made by scam cabal arrangement. This time he was paying back to this very same cabal with their own printing press. This is remarkable. Can you imagine how bold and clever that is? Now the cabal claims 97% the wealth of the world. In fact, some estimate that there is about $700 trillion debt owed to entities. Of course, we know who.
So that's like $100,000 per person on the planet. Each person is
could
that
be
much
even
debt.
more. And now, United States, obviously under the fiat currency, they could not repay those interest rates and that. And Trump says, no problem. Now I'm going to use your printing press that issued these fiat currencies for the last 70 years. And this balloon of debt, and I'm going to now repay you back with your own
No
money.
wonder the media absolutely hates Trump.
And they're silent, they're not saying zilch about any of this.
You guys will always get this good news from our channel.
And I'm just thinking how they must feel now, you know. That's exactly the printing press they've been using, and now say, fine, I'll pay you back now with your own money that you're printing. This is amazing. And so if you want to know how Trump is managing the trade war, yes, that's how he's managing the trade war now, and the deficit and everything else. The taking over of the Federal Reserve must have taken place in 2018 when the trade war with China was heating up. The appointment of Judy Shelton on the Federal Reserve's chair is significant, for it points to the soon restructuring of the United States financial system to revert back to the gold standard. And here's the good news. Judy Shelton is a firm supporter of the gold standard. She's put on the board, by the way, on the 21st, if I'm not mistaken, she was confirmed by the Senate with 13 against 12 votes to be nominated on the board of the Federal Reserve. So she'll take charge in the interim in the Federal Reserve, but I don't believe the Federal Reserve will remain as such for a long time, because that organization was created to print money out of thin air and to pay back all the interest, and actually to give all the interest from the fiat currency to their buddies, the Vatican, the House of Windsor, and the cabal top actually families. But now they're going to restructure or remove the feds completely. I'm anticipating in the second term of Trump's presidency news to come about the Federal Reserve restructuring, and I think Judy Shelton is appointed exactly for that reason. A bit of advice, by the way, we were speaking with Dan about it before we started the video. Currently the dollar price of an ounce of gold is 1959. I heard today on the news. About a week ago it was about 1814, 1820. 6 months ago it was still about 1350. The gold price is climbing, and the reason that it's climbing is simply because this printing of money, even that Trump is using it to help United States to cope with its debt, is not going to last for long. The purchasing power of the dollar is declining, and you will be smart if you buy physical gold, silver, anything that is physical. Please don't buy it on paper.
And I'm just going to also say this, you know, you could call it end time prepping, whatever it is, but just guys also keep some food stocked up and some water and just a couple of those things in case there are, you know, certain events that happen. It's always wise to think ahead and just be smart, you know. Don't stock your house up with stuff that's going to expire, but just always keep just a little bit of extra food on you, I'd say, you know.
Definitely. What will happen is it will reach a point where hyperinflation will kick in. When hyperinflation kicks in, panic buying begins.
Yeah, Zimbabwe, Venezuela.
Exactly. So the supply chain is disrupted, and there's shortages of food and many essentials. Then you're quite on the spot. At least 3 weeks essentials you should stock up, preferably if you can for 3 months, to be on the safe side, because this will happen soon. The hyperinflation, the social unrest that comes with it, and everything else. Some estimate that when the gold reset takes place, or moving back to the gold standard, an ounce of gold will cost anywhere between $6,000 to $15,000 or even higher. I believe Trump's team have planned for gold reserves to be stored safely when that time comes. I believe he has a plan. In order to move to the pandemic issue, which is where I'm leading this whole 2 parts, to answer your question that I had from so many friends about the pandemic, I need to show you the Agenda 2021. Their own UN document, United Nations document of Agenda 2021 is on the screen. If you note, under section 1.6 header reads protecting and promoting human health conditions. Under section B, control of communicable diseases. Subsection 6.12 under objective point L reads, you can follow on the screen, to accelerate research on improved vaccines and implement to the fullest extent possible the use of vaccines in the prevention of disease. Did you hear that last part? To the fullest extent possible. The use of vaccines in the prevention of disease. What is the fullest extent? We did watch the video of Bill Gates. No one can go back to normal unless everyone is vaccinated. What an arrogance.
There will be many Christians going off grid, and the reason why they will be the enemies is because they will refuse to be a part of this new world order. Indeed. And that's why they will become the beheaded.
Sure. This is
another topic.
Another topic altogether. This confirms that mass vaccinations were part and parcel of Agenda 2021. I believe the vaccination push due to the induced pandemic, I call it induced pandemic, will come next year. But the reason I showed you the UN document was to make you aware that the vaccination push was due to come after the year 2021, not now. when the goals of Agenda 2021 had to be implemented. In other words, the vaccination push massively worldwide was meant to happen after 2021. Why then was the pandemic and the vaccination push coming so early? Okay, picture this. The elite suffered terrible loss of their major operational structures in London, in Italy, in the Vatican, in Israel, in Saudi Arabia, in United States, losing one by one the CIA, the FBI, the DOJ, the Pentagon, the Federal Reserve, the Senate is not under their control, and many of the treasonous representatives working for the cabal in those structures have either been executed, imprisoned, or put under house arrest. And their control of Saudi Arabia and UK and Israel, already mentioned, has been either taken away or crippled. Many of those cabal officials who survived the purge are in hiding, possibly in some of their underground bases that are still under their control. From operational point of view, their only remaining stronghold is China. In the Western nations, they're left only with handful leaders still under their control, like Merkel, Macron, and Trudeau, who are helpless to do anything against Trump. All the cabal efforts to remove Trump through the Russian and Ukrainian impeachment hoax failed, and that is when the pandemic hysteria started. Okay, so I'm trying to show you that there was something leading to the pandemic. What do we know so far about COVID-19? Let's focus for a moment there. It is one of the many strains of the coronavirus. It was released in Wuhan sometime in October 2019. The virus mutates, which makes any vaccine against it ineffective. Its mortality rate is more or less on par with common flu mortality rate. It has a high recovery rate. The basic conclusion is that the virus is real, like many common flu viruses are real, but the pandemic is false. Are there other evidences to support that? And I'll repeat, by the way. My conclusion is that the virus is real. There is corona, just like there is an influenza virus, and like many common flu viruses, but the pandemic is false. Here are my other arguments for that. How do we know that it's possibly false? Because by the way it's been reported, which includes false reporting of death counts, false reporting of infections, and false reporting of hospital occupancy. Also, by the way tests were conducted, which includes the inaccuracy of tests, contaminated swabs, and testing equipment. Even the CDC admitted a few weeks ago that tests used in the past could only determine that a person had a common flu. That's all. It can never tell you you've got H1N1 virus. It can never tell you you've got that strain of corona or whatsoever. By the way, the World Health Organization and CDC contradicted many of their announcements. That's the other argument in support of the pandemic hoax. They contradicted themselves about the virus big time. From the effectiveness of masks for protection to travel bans and lockdown recommendations. Another reason, by the way, treatment has been funded, including payment incentives for COVID patients. over any other patients, including those with chronic disease. In other words, they incentivize doctors to count COVID deaths rather than other deaths, to mark people dying from something else as COVID deaths, so that they can receive more actually money. And also, lastly, by the way, the mass media and the social media giants have been promoting the pandemic hysteria. They're singing the same song. When you see all the mass media singing the same song, you know something is not right. There is a coordinated effort. The pandemic hysteria trying to silence any opposing views, including many medical experts.
Yeah, how many YouTube channels were taken down?
Absolutely.
Speaking about COVID.
Yes. These evidences should be enough to make it obvious for any sane person that the pandemic is a well-coordinated hoax. The basic question is, why was it done? My simple answer is because of desperation. Trump's purge of the cabal threatened the very existence of the cabal order, and it has shaken its foundations. Before the elites could lose, before the cabal actually could lose all their power structures, they masterminded one last attempt to push back at Trump and try and oust him. That was the main purpose of the pandemic. How could they pull it off? The cabal still had control of the mass media, the social media giants, as well as all the Democratic and some Republican corrupt government officials, including governors and mayors. Their power structures in the US medical field were still preserved, and the cabal weaponized all their remaining resources to start the pandemic hoax. You can always detect the elite's plans by the narratives the mass media reports. What was their actual plan? To create a pandemic hysteria by using the World Health Organization influence to make the pandemic a global problem and legitimize it, thus forcing the economies of the world to shut down. This in turn would create an economic crisis tsunami, coupled with a pandemic fear hysteria. In that environment, the globalists could cause social unrest of epic proportions and force the average American person to think only about cure and job security. All the advances that Trump's administration claimed to have in building the US economy in the first 3 years of his presidency would evaporate. Through continuous social unrest and mass demonstrations, Trump was meant to be driven out of office or lose the elections. That was the plan. I'm not saying that the pandemic hoax doesn't have other purposes too. I will touch on it a bit later on. But the main reason for the pandemic hoax was to get Trump out of office. Now, I will tell you how they executed their plan and what Trump did in response. While Pelosi's House of Democrats were busy impeaching the president in October 2019, China was actively releasing corona strains of the virus, which allowed foreigners to get infected, if you recall. If you recall, the House Speaker Pelosi kept the impeachment articles almost 3 weeks, not releasing it to the Senate in December. Doing that, she was giving time the virus to actually spread worldwide. And more foreigners were getting infected, traveling all around the world. If you recall, the House, let me just see where I am. When Trump decided to close the borders with China. He was criticized by Pelosi and all the remaining cabal puppets in the US and of course the mass media. The World Health Organization and the CDC lied to the public, saying that no transmission from human to human was possible, all working together to allow the virus to spread. That was the first phase of the plan. The second phase was to do with the worldwide propaganda machine of the cabal spreading fear, causing governments to close their border and economies. We call that conditioning, okay, another word. The third phase was meant to bring social unrest due to the economic hardships, unemployment, hunger and desperation. That is where Antifa and Black Lives Matter came into play, all coordinated and organized according to their plan. They were meant to turn the whole of the United States into a civil war zone and make the country ungovernable. In order to do that, the police had to be discredited and maligned. That is exactly how it played out. Remember, defund the police? The good news is that their fourth phase plan never materialized. What was the fourth phase of the plan? The fourth phase of the plan was meant to force the president out of office by declaring the United States a failed state and ask the United Nations to intervene with troops on the ground. To pull that off, they needed a high-profile person to make an appeal to the international community and cause an international outcry. This person was no other than Barack Obama. Do you recall his speech during the Antifa and Black Lives Matter looting? His speech during the looting that was taking place? He made a speech. Go back and check for yourself. It was gaining momentum. Their plan to go to phase 4 never materialized. How did Trump respond to the crisis? Firstly, he closed the borders with China and the rest of the world. Secondly, he refused personal protection equipment from China, which we know now that were contaminated. China was donating personal protection equipment to most African and other countries around the world, helping to spread the virus. How clever, they were donating it, but actually they were spreading corona strain, one of the corona strains of virus. Because the production of personal protective equipment was sourced from China, the President of the United States mobilized the Military Corps of Engineers and invoked an Executive Order 13909, 13910 and 13911, all to do with the Defense Production Act to produce and supply protection equipment in the United States. As you can see on the screen, it's coming now about the next executive order, which was issued on March 27, 2020, Executive Order 13912, which was to mobilize 1 million reservists to active duty. Check on the screen. Did you know Trump mobilized 1 million reservists? On 27th of March, he issued an executive order. This kind of mobilization only happens in a time of war. That's why when you see the heading US at war, that's how serious it is what is happening in the United States. That is how seriously the national security of the United States was threatened by the globalists. By calling the National Guard, Trump was able to neutralize the Antifa and the Black Lives Matter movement. When Trump deployed the military ship Mercy in Los Angeles and Comfort in New York, together with the rest of the military forces, they managed to block any cabal traffic to one of the two main ports on the east and on the west coast of the United States. Although the official story was that they were deployed to assist in treatment of COVID patients, their true purpose was to rescue trafficked children who were being freed by the Marines, and the ships were used as a buffer zone against any attempt of rioting protesters to reach the headquarters of United Nations and mount an international appeal for help, just like they managed to make a camp in Seattle and Minnesota and other places. They were planning to go to the headquarters of United Nations and to appeal for international troops to come and restore their country back to order, which in the first place the disorder they caused, the Antifa and the Black Lives Matter. That was their plan. And Obama was meant to announce and call, remember, he's got a Nobel Peace Prize, the whole world is looking up to him, and he said, please come and help us. We cannot govern ourselves. We've got a delinquent president. That was the point.
Yeah, one of the candidates for the Antichrist. I've got my money on him.
Their plan never managed to complete phase 4. Praise the Lord. What's more, in about 60 days, by using the military, the Trump administration managed to bypass the media hype and reorganize the supply chain of the United States for protection, equipment, and other essential goods, thus reducing the dependency of United States from Chinese supplies. The cabal is now left with nothing else but hope to reignite social unrest by using corrupt governors and mayors to push on more lockdowns and drive the American middle class to bankruptcy, which is supposed to force them to vote for Joe Biden, who promised Marxist socialist utopia of high taxes and universal income. This is what we can expect in the next few months until the elections. In a nutshell, this was the main reason the pandemic was induced, to topple duly elected president. How desperately the bankers must be. They must know that Joe Biden has no chance of winning the next elections unless the social unrest chaos is taking place. Election win is their plan B. Plan A was to put United Nations troops on the ground and declare US ungovernable. I am afraid that there is a plan C. I pray it never happens. Pray with me that it will never succeed too. I believe that if Trump is re-elected, the elite will try to assassinate him. I believe there were few attempts on his life already. Okay, what else the cabal aimed to gain from the pandemic? As I mentioned, the vaccines mass enrollment was part of their plan with Agenda 2021, but they had to bring the vaccination agenda early out of desperation. Here are some of the other gains for the cabal through the pandemic hoax. A, huge profits for the big pharma. You probably guessed it right. B, higher surveillance of populations due to track and trace AI applications. C, depopulation driven by vaccination. Your favorite one, Bill Gates, speaks about it all the time. Forced centralization of world government bodies due to the pandemic crisis. Drive towards cashless transactions. Gaining more power over people's freedoms through emergency legislations. We've got it in South Africa. We've got a command council that tells us we cannot buy alcohol, is illegal now for the time being. No cigarettes, no alcohol, no
Mormon
travel.
state. We're living in a Mormon state. We got no power sometimes, thanks to greed. And all the others.
Silencing of free speech due to national emergency laws. Introducing global reset due to the pandemic tsunami crisis following the pandemic lockdowns. They're planning this reset for next year. Did you know that in May and June this year the Constitution of the United States was suspended for 60 days? It was suspended for 60 days. I will share the reason for that in our August update next month. I want to clear one thing. I am not a Q follower. All the information I provided, I did through my own research. I promised to give you some good informational sources of alternative and unbiased media. And you can see on the screen, my first recommendation is Liz Wheeler on OAN. You can see the link, it's on the screen. By the way, we should include those links on the in the description box. My next recommendation is Pastor Scott Kesterson and his Brad's FM channel. Very, very brave man of God. Lastly, Bishop Larry Gates and his Global Spiritual Revolution Radio. Also very good source of information in depth. I will end here with this update. Next month in August, we will do a prophetic update on all the other things going on in the world, including Israel, the World War III build-up, and so much more. I'd like to tell you, we focus on United States because that's the epic battlefield. My brother promised some good news for the end, and I'm here to tell you that until the next prophetic update, the end of August, we'll release every week. We'll start releasing the Practical Christianity series. They're shorter in span in terms of time. They're usually around 20-25 minutes. A few of them went to 30, but
yeah, because you love to talk and I like to joke.
Indeed. And the Practical Christianity series is a focus on practical side of Christianity, things that usually in your church either it won't be practiced or it won't be talked about. And I believe we focus on the most necessary things that one should be aware of. For example, how to anoint your house, how to dedicate your house, how to break generational curses, and so forth. So we'll start releasing from the week after. Every week we'll start releasing those series. And if you go on our website, you can actually download the transcripts. There is so much more out of life to talk. Maybe I'll just mention one and then I'll move over to Dan for closing. Did you know that there was one additional reason they wanted to use the pandemic hoax? Did you know that those many deaths in Egypt declared, they use COVID-19 to count those that have been actually executed by the Marines? They actually start putting COVID-19, that many of them have actually died from COVID-19. Of course, they'll never tell their relatives or family that actually they were dead because they were executed for pedophilia, satanic rituals, and so forth. And guess what? In Italy was where all the Vatican priests and the whole of Italy, plenty of them, many of them were executed, and they were all counted as COVID-19 patients that died. How very interesting. And so yes, there is a lot going on underground, and it was a pleasure for me to share that with you, brothers and sisters. Please send us some comments of anything you'd like to share. We'd love to hear from you, brother.
Yeah, that was the good news. And the good news is the series is ready to come out now. I have grown just by that series. So they don't teach all of this in the church. We do. God bless you guys. We'll see you on the next one. Ciao.
Bless you. Ciao.